Hi, my name is Laurie Laskiwski, and I own Parrots, Aviary, and I have been hand feeding and raising baby birds since 2006. And that's what we're here today to talk about, how to hand feed baby birds, baby parrots. And before we get started, I do want to mention that I do not sell unweaned babies. I think the best thing is if the parents can feed the babies or if they can be raised in a group with their siblings by someone who is experienced in hand feeding, brooding, and weaning baby birds. That being said, every single year I hear from multiple people who find themselves in a situation for whatever reason where they have to raise a baby bird. And so we're going to talk a little bit about it. We want to be able to give you that information so that you can help raise that baby so he can have a happy and long life. First, we're going to start with how to mix formula, then we're going to demonstrate how to feed some baby birds, and then I'll come back with some helpful tips and information. So let's get started with mixing formula. You're going to need a bit of equipment in order to properly take care of the babies, to make sure your formula is mixed properly and is mixed at the proper temperature and stays at the proper temperature. So one thing you're going to need is a scale, which we'll talk about when we come back with the tips. Baby birds are really messy, so I like to keep some tissue on hand. You'll need a measuring spoon or a cup or something to measure your water and your formula with. You need something to mix with. You can use a spoon, but a lot of times a fork will work better. I like to use the back of my fork. You can kind of experiment. You'll need a syringe. We're going to use an oral syringe as our method for hand feeding. Definitely need a thermometer to measure the temperature formula and make sure it stays at the same formula, same temperature. And then you're going to need some cold water and some hot water, boiled water. So what we need to do is you'll need to get a commercially prepared formula specifically for baby parrots, and your avian veterinarian can recommend something that's appropriate for your species, or whoever you got the bird from might have given you some formula. And you also really want to make sure you have enough for the whole time you're feeding the bird, because if you can avoid it, you don't want to switch to a different formula unless there was something wrong. But generally speaking, you want a good formula and you want to stick with it all the way through. So the formula that I am using is a commercially prepared formula, and it is meant to be mixed with the ratio of 2 to 1, twice as much water as formula. And that's what we're going to be using. So this, I already have 2 of these worth of water. So we're going to go ahead. You want to do your water first, have it about the right temperature, which is around 102 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit or 39 to 40 degrees Celsius. So you have your water, and then you want to add your powdered formula to the water. Give it a really good stir. So you're going to mix it up and you're going to let it sit for about a minute. And what's happening here while it's sitting is the kind of dehydrated powder is going to rehydrate, and you want all the little particles to start absorbing water. And that takes about a minute or so. So you'll just kind of let it sit for a minute or so. Like I can see it's already starting to get thicker. And after you wait for a minute, you want to check the consistency. So I have one here that I mixed up earlier that is the right consistency, and we'll show you a close-up of that. Now we're going to check the consistency of the formula here. Give it a little stir. Just lift some up and let it drop back into the cup. And you can see that it doesn't immediately blend back in, kind of leaves like a little blob there, and then slowly sinks back into the rest of the formula. And that's about the right consistency to work in a syringe. Now, if it's too thick, you're just going to add a little bit more water, stir it up again, and then check again. And if it's too thin, you can add a little more of the formula powder and then check again. So in order to keep that warm, we're going to put it in this water, which is also the right temperature, which is, again, around 102 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit or 39 to 40 degrees Celsius. So put it in there to keep it warm. And we can take our thermometer and put it right in the formula. And we want to check the temperature. So that's 104, that's right in our range. So we can fill our syringe. And to do that, you just put the syringe in, make sure that the tip is completely submerged so that you don't get air. And then hold down the syringe and pull up the plunger. And then you'll have your syringe filled. You can rinse it off if you want. And this is what we'll use to feed the baby birds. So now we'll go ahead and demonstrate the feeding. This is Luna, and she's a white-bellied Kaik. I'm going to show you how to hand feed her. You want to take note of her crop area down here, which is where the food's going to go. It's empty at the moment. And you also want to look at where her tongue is. You want the food to go down the right side of her throat. So you're going to let her take hold of the syringe, pass it over her tongue, and slowly dispense the food down the right side. And you want to do it in such a way that you're not overfilling her mouth and that she's swallowing it as you dispense it. If she stops swallowing, then you want to stop feeding. Luna. And at this age, sometimes they're not incredibly interested in food. So you might take a little pause and then just start up again when she's ready. This is Aviary. He's just a little bit younger. You can tell by his feathering. He's still got some pin feathers here. But it's the same thing. You can see he's not bobbing his head. So it's a lot slower. You can see he's still holding that food in his mouth. I mean, maybe you can't see it, but I can. This is Kiwi. A little less developed than Aviary was. A little more eager to eat. You can see the difference between birds, though. Luna, not only was she eager to eat, she was eating quickly. Kiwi tends to eat less food and much more slowly. Now, if you have birds of a different clutch from a different group, or if you're concerned about cross-contamination, you'd want to use a different syringe with each bird. But these guys are together. They're from the same parents, so I'm not too worried about it. I just use the same syringes. So if you remember earlier, I mentioned the crop area. That's where the food is going down here. It's hard to see with all the feathers, but you can kind of feel it. It starts to fill up. Feels sort of like a balloon, like a water balloon. So you definitely don't want to feed them where it's overly tight. But just, still soft, but full and round. It's the proper amount to feed them. Another way to gauge the food is that you can feed them about 10%, maybe up to 15% of their body weight. So if you're weighing them, you'll know. So if you have a 100-gram bird, they're going to eat maybe 10 cc's of formula. It's kind of a rule of thumb. It's not hard and fast rule. Depends how hungry they are. Depends how distracted they are. That can be one of the most difficult things with the older babies, is that they're distracted and they want to play. Once they learn how to fly, they're even more distracted. But they still need to be fed. So You just kind of have to work with them. Don't stress too much about it. You remember Aviary ran away, but he's back. Luna really did eat a whole syringe full before she left, and that's about what she normally eats. She was about to jump off the table, so I had to put her back. Just kind of wipe them off, keep them clean. You want to pick something that's not slippery for them to stand on, but also something that their toenails won't get caught on. So I would say Kiwi's full. You can see it's rounded here, and you can feel it. And here comes Aviary. Amari's a little less full than Kiwi, and he's still interested in eating. But see how he's holding it in his bottom beak, and he's just letting it drip out. He's not swallowing it. So when that's happening, you don't want to put more food in, because then you can overwhelm them with food and get a bigger chance of aspirating. But most likely, he doesn't want to eat anyways, so we're mostly done. Okay, so I want to give you a few tips and a little bit more information here that's going to help you when you're hand feeding your birds. It's going to help you with monitoring their progress and their growth and head off any problems that you might have in addition to your hand feeding. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is brooding. If your baby birds are fully feathered, then they'll probably be comfortable in a temperature similar to what you might be comfortable, kind of a room temperature. You do want to keep them out of drafts, so keep them in a warm area, but they may not need supplemental heat. Just the indoor temperature should be fine. Now, if your baby bird does not have all of its feathers, it will require supplemental heat. It will require that heat in order to be able to digest its food properly. In fact, it will need supplemental heat to survive. So it's imperative that if your bird does not have all of its feathers, you seek out information on how to brood it properly for its species and its age. You'll want to keep some records in order to monitor the growth of your parrot and make sure that everything is going well. One of the first signs of a problem is either a loss in weight or a failure to gain weight. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about record keeping. So for each baby bird, you want to weigh them at least once a day. I would suggest weighing them in the morning on an empty crop. So whatever time period you have, which is usually at night where they go the longest without food and their crop is completely empty, you want to weigh them after that. And you can kind of track that weight. So just kind of get a notebook, write down the date, write down the bird's weight. And then you can also write down each time that you feed them and approximately how much you fed them. That's going to be really helpful if you run into a problem and you have to see your avian veterinarian. They're going to ask you for all this information. So if you have it written down, you'll be able to provide them with the most accurate and up-to-date information, which is going to help them to help you and your bird. Now, getting back to the birds we saw, like I said, they were fully feathered, so the brooding is not a big deal, but at some point they'll need to be weaned, which is the time when they're transitioning from being hand-fed to fully eating on their own. And it really is a process, it's not one event. So we do have some resources on the website for the Association of Avian Veterinarians. There's some handouts, there's a video. If it's not there yet, then it's coming soon. And it will give you a description of how to wean baby birds properly so that they continue to get the nourishment they need, they get the socialization they need, hopefully, and they make a smooth transition to eating on their own and being able to take care of themselves like you would expect from a pet bird. Okay, it's really important to maintain the proper temperature of your formula throughout the feeding. And the best way to do that is to take your container of formula and put it in a bath of water that is the correct temperature. So what we're going to do, we have our formula in some water. We're going to take the temperature of the water, and we can add a little bit of hot water. We need to make it warmer. Or we can add a little bit of cold water. We need to make it cooler. And then when we get that water to be at the proper temperature, then we're going to put our formula in it. And then we're going to take the temperature of the formula. And you'll just have to wait for it to equalize so that your formula is the correct temperature. You can stir it a little bit, and it's a little bit like cooking. You have to be patient. Just keep checking the temperature. And then when the temperature equalizes, your formula is at the proper temperature, your water is at the same temperature, then you can go ahead and drop your formula and start feeding your baby. And if it's a warm day, then your temperature is going to stay warm probably the whole time. But if it's cold in the place where you're working, a little bit cooler, you're going to need to add more hot water to keep it at the right temperature. But basically, you're using the water bath to adjust the formula temperature. And the reason you do that and you don't heat it in a microwave or something is it makes all of the formula the same temperature rather than having hot spots and cool spots.